If you retrofit existing buildings with new energy-efficient technology, the savings over time must be large. Do you have any data on what the savings will be and over what period of time?
Well, personally, from a system that we put on our building, that system, the cost was $212,000. It generates about $200 worth of electricity per month. So long-term, over the life of the system, that's pretty substantial. From a short-term perspective, without the tax incentives, it's almost impossible to do, not only for ourselves, but for our customers. So it's very important that the tax incentives, of course, be extended. But from an energy savings point of view, the carbon offset, our system has been in place about 6 months now. We have offset over 2,400 tons of carbon dioxide by that system being in place.
So let me ask you, how do you think we can get more small businesses to retrofit in the buildings that they own?
By maintaining the incentives to do so and helping offset the cost. Over time, costs are starting to come down slowly. There's more manufacturing plants going into production. Even in our state of Oregon, we have one in Hillsboro, I believe, Grow Solar, or is that Solar World? Excuse me, anyway. Also, PV Powered in Bend is making inverters. So in our state, there are quite a few businesses that really are up and going, and they've got a lot of momentum, and we all hate to see that fade.
But also, I heard Ms. Locke talking about the importance of educating. It's just not only the tax incentives, but we have to educate consumers, and in this case, small businesses. So the government and the Small Business Administration could play a role in educating small businesses as consumer as to the role that adopting efficient technologies will bring into their businesses.
Absolutely, yeah. The benefits.
Mr. Reeser, many countries around the world are ahead of the U.S. in terms of green electricity generation, especially the European countries, European Union countries. What do you see as the primary reason that the U.S. is lagging behind in solar as well as other forms of renewable energy production?
Madam Chair, your point is absolutely right on, because Germany and Japan Germany, for example, has a much bigger solar industry than the U.S., and the main reason is they've had consistent federal support to create the incentives for the manufacturers, and also they have what's called feed-in tariffs, so the solar power that's generated actually is bought, the excess is bought at a higher rate. In the U.S., we have something that's called net metering, which is helpful, where excess power is bought by the utility, at least at the same price that they would sell it to you. So the main lesson is that they've had consistent incentives in place that has allowed manufacturers and companies to plan ahead. Just the earlier point about costs are coming down. The cost of a solar module, which is is the main piece in a solar PV system, those costs are coming down because you're starting to get to scale of production. Now, quite frankly, most of that scale has been due to the demand in Europe, and so we're benefiting. But the main lesson is that it's consistent federal policies in place.
Thank you. Mr. Weston, sometimes there is a natural reluctance to move toward products in a marketplace where there are long-established alternatives. This is true whether it be a new television set or a different source of power to heat and cool one's office or home. How has your industry worked to educate consumers about the benefits of wind power?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, and in fact, we see a tremendous growth in demand for wind and solar because consumers are receptive and they're willing to pay more. What seems to be the single most important factor right now in terms of what's the level of new clean energy we can bring onto the grid, particularly from wind, but I think it's true for solar as well, is the availability of a stable tax policy. We have that now for other forms of electrical generation. They're receiving, depletion allowances, other forms of permanent tax treatment. For us, it's been year to year. If you look at the chart on page 3 in my testimony, you see that in 2000, when the credit expired, a 93% drop. Expired again in 2002, a 73% drop. Expired again in 2004, a 77% drop. First time we were able to get 3 consecutive years where the credit was applicable, and the industry grew hand over fist. 35% of the new electricity last year. Well, this year, 2008, we'll match 2007. We'll have another great year. But what's happening now, because we haven't extended the credit, is we're looking at a situation where 2009 could look like these other years, where we're taking the momentum out of the industry. And for those we want to invest in manufacturing, that's a big problem. They want to know that market's there before they spend the money to retool, what used to be a gear plant for automaking. And, the automakers are downsizing and they're looking for markets. Do they go out of business or do they reinvest and create another product? And they need to know that market's going to be there.
And Mr. Rizzo, can you talk to me or to the committee about what is special about California?
Well, California has had a very good state incentive program that has really spurred the solar industry there. They do have the sun, but really, more importantly, is they've had a good state incentive program in place that's been continuous, and also they have high electric rates. And those are really the 2 most important things that drive solar.
Yeah. Mr. Giles, H.R. 6049 that passed out of the House included provisions that would allow consumers to receive tax credits for installing certain hot water heaters, heat pumps, and boilers. Can you talk about how these credits incentivize consumers to purchase more energy-efficient technologies? And what will happen if these programs are not extended?
Most certainly, Madam Chairwoman. Actually, what's ended up happening to us is we had that 2-year stretch from January 1st, 2006 until December 31st, 2007, where those tax incentives were in place. And we personally at TAG Mechanical took tremendous opportunities to market those. And we found that probably 90% of the consumers that we dealt with at the residential level would choose to go to the higher efficiency equipment because the tax credit allowed them to offset the incremental costs from what would have been standard efficiency equipment to the high efficiency. So for them, it became the no-brainer in the equation. And we found that, like I said, probably 90% of the time, a consumer would say, well, if I can get the tax credit, why wouldn't I do this? So it was a very smart thing to do. Unfortunately, those tax credits elapsed at the end of last year. We still market and promote high-efficiency equipment. We find by doing a lot of education that a lot of consumers will take advantage of that without the tax credit, but our rate of seeing people deciding to go to the uptick has reduced. There are now, especially with economic conditions, gas costs where they're at, fuel heating costs where they're going to go this winter, people are starting to make that balancing act and saying, you know what, maybe I can't quite get there, and if they had the incentive, I can guarantee you they would.
Thank you. I have other questions for the other witnesses, but I will come back on the second round, and now I recognize Mr. Shabbat.